I love being a part of growth of startups, of like anybody doing what they love to do. So it's really obvious that this is what Dustin loves to do. And I've only known him for like 6 months now, barely. But in that time, he's been one of the people that, well, I'll be honest, hung out with the most, which is only about 3 times. Haven't quite gotten out of our bubble a little bit in downtown LA, but I love what he's doing. Thank you again for having me up here. I appreciate it. And I love his acronym here. And I'm a former Army guy. We love our acronyms. We love making things really simple because a lot of times we're really simple guys. Reset, recharge, recommit. And the last point is one that I really resonate with a lot. There's another R for you. Reset, recharge, recommit, re-resonate. And so when it comes to recommitting, let me first off by saying that I don't claim to be an expert in anything that I do, but I do claim to be someone who always tries to recommit to them. I always try to be a part of the process, always try to learn new things and just recommit to the process of this human experience. And before I get into my story, which is really what I want to talk about today, is story. When it comes to resetting, recharging, recommitting, and definitely productivity, high performance, I think one of the best things that has worked well for me is to do the work necessary to better understand my story, and that's really what I do today. So on paper, I'm a podcaster. I host a show that's been about 2.5 years now, and it's been my favorite thing in the world. I can't believe that I get to live my life, and I'm not homeless yet, by talking into a microphone every day with world-renowned leaders, experts, authors, people like Dustin, a lot of people here who just are doing their life's work and love what they do. And another part of my business is we run an online coaching and consulting company. So in a way, all I do, I think, is just recommit every day, every time I show up for a client or an interview, to recommit to that storytelling process. For me and for the podcast, and then for the people that we work for and with, whether it's someone helping them, lose weight, gain weight, get to the gym, adopt healthy lifestyles, or on the consulting level, kind of B2B stuff, is really understanding the why, like Dustin said, and which I think is just really recommitting to that purpose of better understanding your story and helping your audience understand theirs and helping them understand yours, especially if you're trying to sell something. So that's what I do. That's my podcast, that's my business. But what I want to share with you guys today is actually something that just kind of came to me last weekend. We're at another event, and it's, anybody ever heard of Bedros Keuilian? Do you know the name? He's, all the people out here trying to run and not fail a business, know who he is. Anyway, he fled Soviet Russia, literally him and his family with the clothes off their back, came to the States in poverty, living out of dumpsters, and just a horrendous story of literally escaping with the clothes on their back, with very little to their name, and now he runs one of the fastest growing 9-figure fitness franchise business called Fit Body Boot Camp, net worth like over 100 million, and he's very, very admirable and very, very successful. And when I was listening to him, he was in a room full of like 30 other people, online coaches and nutritionists, things like that. And I was really paying attention to what he was sharing. It wasn't like, hey, do this one thing to level up your business. It wasn't, this will guarantee you 6 figures in 2 months kind of thing. All he did that really connected to me, connected with everybody else in there, and made us stop and pay attention, was tell his story. And in that, I was picking up on some things that he was sharing that were really key benchmarks that reminded me of some key benchmarks in my life and in my story, and that I want to share with you guys that I think would be really helpful, because whatever the reason is you're here, just to get loose and limber for yoga, to support Dustin, to just, community, to learn something to maybe take back to your life and to take back to your business or to an idea or a passion project, whatever. I really firmly believe one of the, like I said, the best things that have helped me is to become better at learning and understanding my story. Therefore, I can better engage with and share that with my audience to help them really better understand who I am. It adds a humanization aspect, which is always a great connection point, but then also that's something that can inspire people, I think, to connect with, like, wow, they shared this part of their life. I've had that happen, or I'm going through that right now. So storytelling for me is a big passion. And so I'll just start from the beginning. Actually, I'll have you guys write down 3 things that I hope I can remember to kind of go back to along my story. And it's ESP, emotional, spiritual, and physical. These are 3 key areas when I was looking at Bedros' story and I was re-examining mine and really applying that lens to a lot of other people that I've had the pleasure of meeting and talking to and getting them to share 40 to 60 minutes of their busy day with me on the show is ESP, emotional, spiritual, physical. So I'll go back to the beginning. When I was about between the ages of 4 and 5, I grew up in a very, very, like this big, actually, small town in Southwest Virginia. And I had the best childhood. I can't complain. I grew up on a little over 160 acres, just in the mountains. I was the oldest of 3. All we did was just play in the creek, which is Southern talk for a creek. We had beautiful mountains and land and animals, and we had this huge husky I would ride literally through the fields. And we lived with my grandparents, and my grandfather had this beautiful garden, and we ate most of the foods that we grew. I think they even had a little hookup with a guy down the road, our neighbor, about 2 miles away in the next cabin. And he had some cows and pigs, and I think that's where we got our meat. I don't know. So I grew up very blessed, I think. But when I was thinking about my story, the very first real memory that I have, I'll say consciously, was one of E. Is that me popping? Okay. It's not my fault. Of E, this emotional trauma. The very first memory that I can remember consciously is walking back down the mountain from building a fort, setting a fire, getting into trouble, who God knows what. And I came back down. I think I was with my little sister. And we had this carport kind of attached to the side of our house. It's like an open air garage. And my mom was there sitting with my dad, and she was very distraught, very emotional. She was crying, and the only few words that I can remember are, what are we doing? Why are we here? And we're broke. We have no money. And to be your first memory of what am I doing? Why am I here? And I can't afford this. I think my wife would attest. There are very similar questions that I still say all the time. Going anywhere, doing anything. Like, God, it costs how much? Why are we going? What are we doing? So that was kind of like my first experience. And then very soon after that, my parents split up. And they thought it best to kind of keep the guys with the guy, the girl with the girl. So my brother and I stayed with my dad. And my sister went and stayed with my mom. We lived about 3 to 4 hours apart, still in Virginia. And we would see each other every so often, holidays. And so I would grow up separated from my family, more or less. And then at about the age of 12, according to my stepmom and dad, I started going down the wrong path, hanging out with the bad kids in school. And I was someone who always feared getting in trouble. So I didn't really know what they were talking about, but I guess the one time I got detention, they were like, no, screw you, Chase, relax. So they told me, took me out to a nice little dinner. I think it was the cafeteria where we always ate, the 99-cent kid special, again, with that financial issue. And they told me, hey, Chase, actually, we're changing schools. And it's not like next year, but it's actually like next week. And so another trauma point in my life. And the whole point of bringing these benchmarks up is to realize that I now realize that these are the significant benchmarks in my life, trauma points, experiences that really mold my story that have continued to allow me to connect with other people who maybe have gone through something similar. And so I was yanked out and put into, this is about the time when my parents grew up in the Southern Baptist household, kind of, and my dad specifically was going through a little, midlife crisis kind of thing. I don't know. He found the church, loved his life, and wanted me to kind of experience that as well. So I transferred not only to a private school, but a very small private Christian school. I graduated in the top 6 in my class. There were only 6 people. I dated half the girls in my class. There were only 2. And so, May loves when I tell that story. It's my only high school story. And so, it was like another emotional trauma and my first, I would say, kind of spiritual trauma, because as a 12-year-old kid, I was, trying to align myself with this higher purpose and, what do I believe? My parents believe this. All the people around me believe this. And so I was going through this kind of spiritual transformation, questioning period of my life. And then fast forward again, it gets to be like junior, senior year. All my friends are applying to colleges, taking the SAT. And I was an okay student, but I never really knew exactly what I wanted to do after school. I honestly didn't even know if college was an option because of, we were like middle class, I would say, but very concerned about finances still again. And my dad flat out told me, he's like, if you want to go to college, like, I'll find a way to make it happen, whatever you want to do. And so I kind of sensed that it was another burden on them. It was going to be another trauma for them. And so then I kind of was like, well, I don't know what I want to do. Don't want to waste my time, waste their money. And I looked to the military. My dad was an Army guy. My uncle was a Marine. My grandfather was a World War II vet. And our family history of service goes all the way back to definitely the Civil War. We think even like American Revolution. And so that really stood out to me. It's like, this could be a cool part of my story. So senior year, Christmas break, while all my friends are enjoying their Christmas presents and everything, my dad and I actually drove up from Roanoke up to Richmond, Virginia. I swore in. So a 17-year-old kid, swore my life away, committed to 6 years. I enlisted. I joined as a linguist, which when I told my high school Spanish teacher, she asked me again, what job did you? Because I'm horrible at languages. I had to take Spanish summer school, but they were waiving this like great incentive. It was like a $20,000 sign-up bonus. Hey, we'll pay for your college, whatever. I was like, all right, cool. If you're going to train me, I'll take your money, I'll take your training. But looking back, I knew that was such a huge part to his story. And this is really where our stories truly began to kind of interweave. So high school came and went. After graduation, I had about 2 months where I just started to run and realized, what the hell did I sign up for? All we're going to do in the military is just run. If I would have known as much running and shaving, I probably would have thought twice. And hats. Anytime you're outside, you have to wear a hat, which I have a fat head. It didn't work out well. I literally had to get an extra large Kevlar, our helmets and shit. It was weird. There's a lot of skull underneath this hair up here. So I did my thing, and then months into my basic training, the letters from my dad started to become less and less, started to become more of my mom stepping in, and that's when we found out he was diagnosed with a terminal illness. He had Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS. And I was so passionate and so adamant about fulfilling this legacy. I thought it was going to be the best part of his story, was me being the extension of it. So once I found out that he was given a death sentence, another emotional trauma, definitely another spiritual trauma, 18, 19-year-old kid crying out, why God me, why my family? I tried to get out of the Army. If you can prove you have a family hardship and, it's legit, they will drop your paperwork. They'll let you get out of your contract. And true to my dad's nature, once he found out I was trying to do that, literally the last days, maybe weeks, he could walk. He flew out from Virginia to California. I was stationed up in Monterey at the time. And the first thing that went for him was his speech, a very, very garbled speech. If you know anything about ALS, Lou Gehrig's, it's an autoimmune disorder, right? I always have to refer back to the nurse. And so the body just eats away. And so the very first time I saw my dad after leaving, he was very, very different. My dad was a big, burly guy. He was in the infantry, in the Army, just like big, tough guy. And he dramatically started to look different. And his speech was very garbled. He showed up in California on a cane, just already a different man that I had come to know and love. And my dad and I were very, very close. He was my best friend, my leader, before I even knew what that meant in the military. And so he spent 4 days, he took me off base. Well, we went back and forth. He made sure to go meet with my leadership and basically tell them, hey, no matter what, don't let this guy leave. Like, I'm his dad. Like, you guys can do whatever you want, yes, at the end of the day, but don't let my story, don't let the ending of mine allow his to stop before it ever even begins. And so he spent 4 days just going over and over with me, like, Chase, remember why you did this. These are the great things that the military gave me. You have your whole life ahead of you. A lot of father-son bonding, a lot of dinners, a lot of coffee. Quick side story, when my dad got out of the Army, did a couple odd jobs here and there, but he wound up going into business for himself, another entrepreneur. That's definitely where I get it. From the age of about 11 to 12, right when they transferred me schools, he opened up a coffee house, and then over the next 5, 7 years, we had 4 or 5 other coffee houses and a high-end steakhouse. And so I grew up making coffee, drinking coffee. It probably still runs in my veins. My cold brew's right there, actually. And so we spent time in Monterey and San Francisco, Northern California, and he just really reminded me of something that I had heard my whole life. And if you see anything in my content, you'll understand the backstory now of Ever Forward. No matter what happens in your story, no matter what obstacle comes before your way, no matter this emotional, spiritual, we'll get to the P in a second, I don't want to give it away. Whatever happens, it's all part of your story. And you need to experience it, you need to live it, and you need to live it through it, basically. And so I decided to stay in, and about 15 months later, almost a year later, he passed away. And every time I would go back to visit him, every couple months, whenever I could leave, he was just worse and worse and worse and worse. And the horrible thing about ALS is that it doesn't affect the mind, at least what we know. So he literally just became a prisoner in his own body. Just atrophying away. The last 3, 4 months of his life, he was bedridden in a hospital, could not talk. And so every time I came home, it was just a frail being. And so that was just continued emotional trauma, and even more continued spiritual trauma, because every time I would go home, my family would just be like, be together, be family, let's pray about it. And I was just very much kind of raging against the machine at the time. And so he passed away, and I had a few days of leave I could be with my family, and I had to go back. Uncle Sam was waiting on me. I had used up all my leave and was even 30 days in the hole. All my vacation was gone, basically. And so I had a few days to kind of deal with it. And then I went back to being soldier chase. And for the next 4 or 5 years, that's what I did. But several years later, that P popped up. By me not dealing with that emotional trauma, by me not dealing with that spiritual trauma, those experiences, I really was going through a lot of darkness. And I never say that I was willing or even thinking about taking my own life, but I just flat out got to a point where I didn't care if I woke up or not. And so, well, what's the easy way out of that? All right, well, Chase, you're in the Army. During that time, I was in OAF era. Soldiers die all the time. So I volunteered a couple times to try to get out of my job, to literally, hey, volunteer, go put me in harm's way. I want to go to Afghanistan. I want to go be a soldier. I want to be the guy knocking down doors. Or I just want to have a higher probability of someone sending me home in a box wrapped in a flag rather than walking back home. And it's funny how life works, because of those decisions that I was making, to be selfish and to try to put myself in harm's way. The first one fell through. The second time, I was going through some series of training. I got promoted, and I was really primed for this next deployment. So I wound up doing some war games. You put myself in order, hey, from here we go into the desert in California, and then from here we go to Afghanistan. So I was like, all right, cool. I'm on my path to not come home. Several days, I think not even a week into these war games, I was leading my team, leading an ambush against the fake enemy. We call them the OP4, the opposing force. And just from a lot of just years of being in the military, compound injuries, just the lifestyle, being dehydrated in the heat of Texas at the time, and just I'm in all my body armor, got my weapon, my gear, about 80 pounds or so on top of me. And I went to lead this attack, and I was like, who the hell shot me? I heard this pop, this snap at the back of my leg. I immediately hit the ground. I was like, guys, we're gaming right now. This is supposed to be who put a live round in the blanks? I thought I got shot. Turns out what happened was I tore my hamstring. Just from laying down, too much, too soon, the wrong direction, all the gear, all the compounding variables just worked against me. And so I immediately stopped the training. I was probably yelling some expletives, yelling at my sergeant at the time. And it was just black and blue and coiled up. And so they pulled me out, sent me to the hospital, torn hamstring, rehabilitated, tried to get back on the deployment roster, re-injured myself, compounded other issues. And in that initial injury as well, I suffered injury to my L4 and L5 vertebrae. Basically, they went this way and the rest of my body went that way. And then over time, trying to just get back on that roster, just fighting the story that was not mine to tell. Got re-injured again. I was just a young, stupid kid, and completely got yanked out of my unit. I got sent to a med hold unit, and basically, like, I'm all hardware from the waist down. Both of my femurs have been completely reconstructed, pulled from my body, reshaped, and put back in, rods and pins to basically keep me upright and mobile. And so there's the P that I'm talking about. There's the physical trauma. And part of my studying in the human body and the mind and how the body always kind of keeps count, I now kind of attribute that injury, that P, to the E and the S before. Just holding on to a lot of that trauma, that experience, the anger, the questions, and just not working through things, I think definitely has a correlation to manifesting itself in that physical manner. So my identity got rocked. I was a patient for about a year and a half, just in and out of the hospital. My only job was to get cut open, to rehab, learn how to walk again, and then once I could, go back and do the other side, start it all over again. So about a year and a half, I was just a patient, and then once I could finally walk again on my own 2 feet, they kicked me out. They're like, "You're unfit for duty. You are no longer a soldier." So at just shy of 24, I'm an overachiever. I wanted to stay in 20 years and retire from the military. I retired after 6. And I was medically retired, actually. I'll never forget, signed off, left base with my wheelchair on the roof of my truck, my cane up in the front seat, which looks really shady because at the time I was big into like off-roading. I had this jacked truck and it was like giant tires, and I would pull up into like the handicap spot and like looking like an a-hole in this like giant rig, and I would come hobbling out like this. And But so then my identity changed completely. I was still going through that physical trauma. So then I moved back home to Virginia with my family, because I was like, all right, well, fine. Now this part of my story, I get to be with my family. The part of my story that I wish that I could have had more of, because I was in the Army. My family was going through this loss of our dad. I was, like I said, the oldest of 3, so I've got like this big brother syndrome. In the military, I was a leader. I was an E6 staff sergeant, so that's kind of the equivalent of like, at any time, minimum 15 people, upwards of like 15, 60, like I'm directly responsible for leading, mentoring, and empowering. And so now literally one day it was all gone. So, all right, well, cool, let me go try this college thing. So next part of my story is go to college campus. I toured, actually where I met my wife, May. We didn't meet for a couple more years later, but when I went, actually for the first time, I had my mom help me. I was still on my cane, was still rehabilitating, so I'm this 24-year-old old man on campus with his mom, helping him kind of walk around, get to classes, get signed up and everything. So that was a big pivotal part of my story, and at that point I'd really gone through a lot of the ESP, but a lot more of that emotional and spiritual stuff really manifested itself and kind of came to a head when May and I met. My senior year last semester, her junior year of nursing school, and I don't know if you all know anything about Persians, but like they take no bullshit. They see it, they call it, and her and I, we always joke, we have like day 0, and then from then on was it. We started dating like the moment we met each other, and maybe like a few hours, a couple days into it, she could tell that it was the big wall, and so a couple years go by, we start dating, and then we go through relationship stuff, then we get engaged, and we're married now, we're together for like 6 years. But then in that time, all of my background really kind of came to a head. And I think it's because a couple years after we started dating, that's when I started getting woo-woo. I started listening to podcasts. Listen to one podcast becomes empowered, or enlightened, whatever the phrase is. And I was like, wow, there's something to this stuff. Like I went to school for exercise science. I'm a health coach. I'm a trainer. All the things that the Army told me that I couldn't do, I am now doing for myself and for a living. I took the thing that they told me I could not do, and I made it my purpose. And so I went to school for it. I got a job for it. But then I started to realize that there's actually more to just physical development. Becoming a stronger person, being able to walk again, being able to pick up a weight, being able to get out of bed, all these things. I was like, this is all well and good, but like it's becoming more. And so I started looking in. So journaling, listening to podcasts, audiobooks, the gym, fitness, nutrition were just 2 components. I was like, there's something more. So then I started with really the self-help work and looking inward and literally began to write out my story, just brain dumping and journaling, the good, the bad, the ugly. And in that time, all that stuff in the back started coming back up again. And I'll never forget this one time. I forget which movie we were watching, but I diagnosed TBI from a lot of injuries and PTSD, and it hit me. We were watching this movie, and they took a sheet. This character had died, and they just pulled it over the body, and I lost it. I immediately transported back, like always. When we would date, if there was a movie, there was a scenario where anybody was in the hospital or somebody was dying, I couldn't be there. It wasn't just a memory for me, it was a feeling, and a feeling that I was just suppressing for a long time. That trauma I was just suppressing for a long time. And I was having like this panic attack and just was frozen, and she literally had to shake me out of it. And again, like years ago, she said, hey, get your shit together. Like, I love you, but like you need more help. You need to, there's all this work you're doing is great, but there's more to your story that you are not allowing to read and to share. And so that was another big pivotal moment. And so that's when I started going back to a therapist, started, probably should have gone more, but at the point I thought it was good. And I realized that it was something that takes continual work. Just like we all go to the gym, we all take a walk, we all try to eat well. All the things that we're here for to learn how to do or to do better, what goes on in here and what goes on up here are just as important and need that consistent work as much as possible. And so I did. I started working through it all. And she probably wishes she maybe didn't ask for all that, because now I won't shut up. She's like, you used to not say anything, and now I wish you would go back to that. All you do is just talk and feelings and emotions and stories, blah, blah, blah. So you asked for it, which is great now. That's what I do, as a podcast, yeah. So thank you. So what I'm trying to say is, when I was listening to Bedros' story, and he was telling me about like literally escaping with his life, it really made me look back at my own story. And to really look back at these moments in my life where I thought were the worst. I didn't know how I was going to get through it. I didn't think that really mattered or how it contributed to my overall story. But everybody, I think, has 1, 2, 3, or all of these kind of benchmarks in your life. Some emotional experience, emotional trauma, spiritual, physical. And by digging deep back into, if you just think ESP and look back at these areas of your life, it will, I think, not only help you better understand your story and what got you to where you are today, but then by sharing it. And I know that that takes work, and it's not easy to put your life out there for social media, for your friends, for your community, whatever. But by doing that, your story becomes better understood by yourself. You become humanized to your audience. And then I cannot tell you how many times I try to be positive, I put up happy-go-lucky things all the time, but when I put up the darkness, when I put up the things like, I didn't want to live, all the parts of what I just shared with you guys, I get the most feedback. People are like, yes, me too, kind of thing. And so if you're struggling to connect with your audience, if you're struggling to connect with yourself, if you're struggling for growth and productivity, one area that has truly helped me is to become a better storyteller. And that starts with my own story, better understanding it, being able to better share it, and then being able to better connect with my audience's story so that then they can share theirs. And I think this life is nothing more than just a continual growth period, better understanding our stories and realizing how we all do come together in our stories. So if you're struggling on what to post, if you're struggling on, what am I journaling about, if you're struggling on like a intention for the day or how can I become better in anything I'm doing, I would challenge you to go back to your story and see if you have any of those benchmarks that you can dig deeper on. Be careful. Sometimes you will get what you ask for, and just go along with the process. So that's my story. My name is Chewning. Thank you guys for listening.